our podcast episode. I don't even know at this point. I'm TW. It's Justin giving you the latest on tech from non-technical guys in the industry for what, 30, 35, 40 years, something crazy like that. We've seen it all. Mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, layoffs. We've been through the ringer, put it that way. But there's a lot of news this week. We're going to talk about Apple. What is going on? Worldwide Developer Conference. Was there anything interesting? Is there a new iPhone, a new iPad? What's the deal with Apple? The AI, are they causing more layoffs? I think Andrew Jassy from Amazon has stated such. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about OpenAI in the military. What's the deal? And also on the jobs front, what does this mean for us? For everyday people, we're hearing about all these things. How do we adjust? How do we move around this new sort of landscape that we're entering? So we're here. We're here for you. So let's kick it off. Justin, what do we got?
Yes, Worldwide Developer Conference happened. I think it was like a few weeks ago now. We thought, it's been a bit since we did the last pod, and Apple, is one of the most storied companies in the Valley. Its success is what catapulted a lot of, companies coming to Silicon Valley and being successful and bringing in talent, et cetera. And it's really at a key inflection point of the business and what it means from a brand perspective, from a technology perspective, from being kind of best in class on the product side. And coming out of WWDC, at least like going in, I was thinking, okay, they're going to hit us with something just totally brand new. They're going to bring the strategy together. There's going to be some AI play that we didn't know about, and really that didn't happen. I think the biggest news was about Liquid Glass and the new interface that they're leveraging for their new product lines. And as an Apple stan, I'll definitely say I'm an Apple stan. I was concerned. About what this foretells for the future, and particularly because Apple Intelligence, for all it was supposed to be, and them with kind of like the relaunch of Apple Intelligence, new features and functionality, it hasn't hit. I mean, the real question from like a product perspective is, hey, are you going to move over to Android? No, I don't think I'm going to do that. But if there's a new interface that comes that gets a lot of consumer adoption, this could be a huge concern for the business. So we should jump into it, like kind of all the things. But I'm concerned. I'm a bit more concerned about Apple than I have been, over the last decade.
I would say the one interesting note from Apple at the Berkshire Hathaway quarterly earnings, I don't know if you saw, but Warren Buffett shouted out Tim Cook because, Warren Buffett is stepping down after this year, but he said, Tim Cook has done an incredible job taking Steve Jobs and all the things he's done and elevating it to the next level and scaling it and growing it. And if you ask the average person, they probably say, once Steve Jobs left, the company has done nothing. And then you hear someone like Warren Buffett, which is like, I didn't invest in this thing till Steve Jobs passed. And then all the things that Tim Cook have done have really made Apple incredibly scalable and massive and disruptive. And, it's almost like the flip side of how I thought about where Apple was. But maybe that's what it was. It was Steve Jobs did the innovation, and Tim Cook scaled it and got it to everywhere across the globe, and it's turned it into what it is today. And which innovation wise, I would have to agree with you. It's scary. There's nothing. The Apple Vision hasn't done what we thought it was going to do. There hasn't been an incredible sort of product come out of there. It's all been sort of like granular A/B testing, gradually getting better, and we're still stuck with iMessage and FaceTime and
Yeah.
those initial App Store innovations that have like catapulted them, and they've kind of like just relied on that, right? Like
Yeah.
enhance it. Maybe that's what Tim Cook's job was, because it is really hard. They kind of hit the lottery with these few things, and they stepped on the gas, and they've kind of on cruise control now, I would say. But yeah, I'm a little worried. You're right. Like with AI coming and Ivy announcing he's working with OpenAI, and now new products, form
Yep.
factors are coming. Does that mean Apple's left out of this thing? I don't know. It seems to be the case, because I would say Apple Intelligence has left. I mean, they mentioned Siri 2 times in the entire WWDC.
Yeah.
So Siri was the head of AI before AI. It's pretty much non-existent now, right? It's not, you don't hear, oh, Siri told me this and that. I think there's some real concerns. If AI is the future, where is Apple involved in this thing, and where does it go next? It seems like, I don't know, the moat for them is slowly um, getting smaller and smaller, right? Like I think the next
Yeah.
form factor could be it for them. If we go to a glasses, if we go to a I don't know what microphone camera thing, maybe the Apple. I mean, I feel like it's always going to be a thing, and especially in the U.S. But it's interesting for sure. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I agree. I think that, the devil's advocate point would be in the short term, company got a ton of cash. They still, it's basically they're using them or Android, and most people, at least within kind of more profitable markets, aren't going to be making that switch. So I think, for the short term, they're likely fine. But to that form factor piece, right now your mobile phone is kind of like your operating system, the actual hardware, but I think it's becoming more of like the software that's your operating system. And if the operating system is actually, ChatGPT or some LLM, and you have fewer apps and it's more just an interface, and there's a device that's better integrated with that interface relative to what Sam Altman and Joni Ivan might be doing, that can change, not right away, but that can change the business, like that could change the business model and the type of products consumers are using. So I think that is a real threat down the line. Again, not necessarily short term, but longer term threat. And if there's anybody that's going to be able to do it, it'll be the guy who's kind of the kind of the design visionary behind that product. Now teaming up with what's now, I think, like the sixth most trafficked website in the world, which is ChatGPT. Um, I Yeah, short term, I think they're probably fine. Longer term, I'm a bit concerned, and I think it also brings up the question of what's the next play, right? Is it new leadership that's needed in there from the AI side? I think there have been some conversations around that. Is it them using the kind of crazy stockpile of cash that they have now to be acquisitive and start pulling some companies in? Is the differentiator like IP, and how do they work with partners along those? Like, I think there's a bunch of plays. I would be curious to see, like, if you had one bet that they could make kind of coming out of this time, what would you like to see them do, or what do you think they'll do?
I mean, I think it's still devices as a form factor, and then building a platform off that. Whatever that next form factor is, I think they thought it was Apple Vision, or maybe it is. Maybe the next iteration of Apple Vision will take us there. So we'll see. I don't. I definitely think their bread and butter is like slick, sleek devices that offer a ton of convenience and usability. That I think high end devices is where they're sort of, and they've mastered it, right? I think the
Yep.
iPhone and the iPad and the MacBook and all these are incredible devices that everybody kind of takes for granted at this point. I just think there isn't a next device, so maybe that's why it feels like they're not innovating. But it's also really hard to come up with something that has a billion DAU. Like it's kind of
Yeah, I mean, yeah, fair, especially if something that's hardware. Fair enough.
yeah, yeah,
I think I think that's really interesting in terms of like, hey, they just need to have some other breakout product and they need to figure it out. For me, what I actually lean more toward is their play in Apple Intelligence, whatever they have going on the AI side right now, just isn't working. If I had all that cash, I'm acquiring like Anthropic as an example, and I'm bringing in some insanely talented researchers that I think we'll talk about it a little bit down the line. There's been a ton of talent wars right now going on where people are spending absurd amount of money to bring in, individual top AI talent. But I think you invest in one of the top research labs and you bring it in and you get those folks who kind of really know what they're doing. Is obviously an area that they don't have as much, or they don't have as much knowledge or talent, and you just make a huge bet there
yeah.
because you have to. Because if a form factor changes and they're not able to kind of really jump on that product line,
It's tough.
where does it go?
Let's jump into the next topic, which was AI and its layoffs. What have we heard recently? What's the latest on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So yesterday, Andy Jassy released a memo to all the Amazon employees. And basically, he's saying the quiet part out loud right now, which is Amazon will have fewer corporate employees in the future because of generative AI. And what he said in the memo, one thing that kind of stood out, and I'm sure people are going, crazy on blind about this, was like, you know, I'm looking for fewer people and more output. And that's the future of the company. That's where things are going. And this isn't like a hypothetical anymore. This is happening now. So Amazon cut, I think since 2022, 27,000 plus jobs. And you just have to get people to upskill. And at the end of the day, Amazon isn't alone as well. Shopify CEO is like, hey, before I release any headcount to the teams, you got to demonstrate that you can't do this with AI. Or no, they reduced their headcount by 40%. Due to AI. And they said, well, they've clawed it back a little bit. They said, okay, we maybe went a little far, but okay, maybe they should have done 20% instead of 40%. That's still a massive shift. And so, and then just the AI is kind of like the fastest technology wave ever. And so within this context where we're not like, it's not coming soon, we're in it now. What are the things that, that remain? And I think that one, if you're someone within this context, what's something that AI can't take away? And so one thing that I tend to think about is taste. And I'd love to get your perspective on this because you've done a lot of amazing work within kind of brands and apparel and understanding how to bring, a commodity, a commodity and make it something kind of more than that. So I think your perspective would be really helpful here. But I think that that's one thing that you can't just say, AI, at least right now, create this campaign that's going to be very emotionally resonant and have a certain feel that is going to truly like drive a lot of consumer adoption. I think it can help round the edges, but I think that has to come from human beings right now. But I think you have a lot of experience on that piece, so would love your
Yeah,
thoughts
I
there.
think creativity is still, I think, something that AI struggles with, right? Like coming up conceptually with something and building a story, a real story. I think you need real people. And I think ultimately people can see through BS. And, if you're making something up from scratch through AI, it's really tough. I think it needs to come from the heart and passion, and that shows through, especially when you're thinking of doing something creative and out of the box. I think you need to give, your AI tools that out of box thinking, and they can refine it, but that initial thought needs to come from you. I don't think you
Mm-hmm.
can say, and people have tried, I want to come up with some product for this, do it for, and like those things are generally fall pretty flat unless you have the exact thing in mind. I think what it has done though is, if you do have great ideas, to put them down and help you refine them, and the execution part becomes easier than it was in the
Right.
past, right? Like I think
Yeah.
if you're out there and thinking about, everybody has a friend that calls you up with, I got this idea, let me run it by you.
Yeah.
Everybody's got that. Everybody's got an idea. Now you actually have someone to help you iron it through and execute if you ask the right questions. ChatGPT and Gemini, all of them can help you sort of refine that idea. But that idea needs to come from you. That's not to say in the future, when everybody's inputting all these ideas, it's not going to be great at that as well.
Yeah. It's coming.
Right now, that is probably, if you're in a company where you're like, hey man, my job is easy, it's repetitive, I feel like AI can take it over. It's time for you to start using AI as a tool, because if you're thinking that in the back of your mind, it's going to happen at some point.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah.
companies nowadays are actually educating everyone on how to use AI to make your job better. Probably 6 months ago, it felt like you were cheating on an exam using AI, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
required as part of your work, which I think is incredible. Like that is a shift at an enterprise level that I can't remember seeing, right? From like, hey, don't use AIs, you're stealing company information. Here are all the AI tools for the company, go use.
Go for it.
And I think that shift, like it's happening really fast. So people need to catch up and understand how to use these tools. So if you're in a mindset or in a business or in a position where you're just like repetitively doing something, and you feel that heat, you should definitely jump on this and start learning
Yeah.
pretty quickly, right?
I want to build on your point and then make a little different one. So building on your point, I think that in the near term, your job won't necessarily be replaced by AI, but you're going to be replaced by someone who's using the tools and
Yes,
kind of understands how to use them and is more efficient.
right.
These companies, at the end of the day, what matters most is creating shareholder value, particularly for publicly traded companies. And it's not about happy families and making sure everybody lands smoothly. It's about, increasing revenue and profitability and, distributing that to executives and shareholders, right? Like, let's just call it what it is, right? Like that's the environment that we're in. The other thing that I would say relative to, okay, what can't AI take away? I think taste is definitely within that context. I also think distribution becomes a lot more important. And, a lot of marketers that kind of listen and follow us. And if you follow me at all on LinkedIn, you probably heard me talk about this all the time. But, just because you can create content and content is more ubiquitous than ever, and you can create websites and tools, et cetera, you still need to be able to build an audience. You still need to be able to kind of gain traction, and you need to create some type of stickiness from either like an emotional resonance or access to a community that helps you gain distribution for whatever product or service is out there. So the AI can't like spin up a whole TikTok community or Reddit community or whatever of people that exist automatically for you now. That's something you still have to build. And so to the extent that you can lean in and be thinking about that, I think that's also really important.
Yeah, we've talked about it repeatedly. This is an interesting time. Every week we're getting on, it feels more and more real where AI is going and leading us. And yeah, we're just adjusting. We're here for everybody else too. So if you got comments, questions, hit us up. Follow Justin on LinkedIn. We'll make sure we have that description below, and keep up with all the AI movement, because I definitely feel it. We've talked about it in the past. Like, these teams are getting scrappier and scrappier. Justin and I, interviewing in the last year, felt it. Where it's like
Mhm.
the expectation for these roles is so high, not because
Yeah.
of you, but because of AI. Right? They're like, hey, I can just ask chat. You got to bring something else to the table. I have access to AI too, and what you need to do is have an incredible grasp on how to use it for your position.
Yep.
And I think, it's just time to get on that thing and figure it
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah. Maybe one other piece here before we jump to the next topic, which is, in a lot of ways, this is scary hours. Hey, what's going to happen? The rate of progress and of job loss and everything is faster than, in other times of the past. But is also, the reckoning that's happening with these big tech companies is an opportunity for founders, is an opportunity for builders right now. You have a lot of the tools at your fingertips to start to compete with these incumbents and work with a lot smaller teams to create differentiated value. And you're also going to have a lot of people, not because they're not doing great work, they're doing excellent work, but these companies are shrinking, and there's going to be a huge talent pool of folks for you to work with. So if you're a founder, I talked about this in one of my posts, you need to start thinking like a VC and think about, how do you start to form relationships with some really sharp operators at these companies now, so that as they're evaluating new opportunities, or if they unfortunately are laid off, like, you're the first one they come to help you build a venture, and and this new wave of product and innovation that's coming.
Yeah. What do you think now is the best time or the worst time to run a startup? Given where AI is and how easy it is to replicate businesses as well, like, you come up with something, it's easy for AI to just replicate it. What are your thoughts on that? Is it good, bad, both? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that my context of being an entrepreneur before was within the context of kind of a venture backed ecosystem, right? You want to create $1 billion value company. Oh, it's actually more than that. Now you have to create a decacorn. You can't even have a company valued at $1 billion right now. At least the comps, for what I'm hearing, it's got to be at 10 billion, and it's just very difficult to create those businesses. And I'm not saying to not necessarily do that, but to more answer your point, if you're just someone who has a unique insight on a niche, and is willing to put in the work with learning how to use some of these basic AI tools to kind of build out distribution, and you're a hustler and you're willing to talk to 100 people, kind of really make sure you're creating differentiated value, in 4 or 5 months, you could spin up a product that's making you 5 million ARR. And that might be good enough,
Yeah.
and perhaps it should be. Perhaps that always should have been the case. So I think it's context. I think it's context of like what it means to create value within this new ecosystem, and that it doesn't necessarily need to be just a venture model. I think that there's definitely places for that, and it's still important, but um, there's a lot more that you can do without necessarily thinking about it as multi-billion-dollar outcomes.
It seems like today, I mean, the biggest hit probably are fresh college graduates, people just getting into these businesses, because now your brand actually is your personal brand is important, because you're coming to the table with knowledge and experience with AI. If you're just coming to with hard grit and AI, it's a tougher sell. So you need to go and figure it out how to use AI and be really on top of things. If you're a new fresh college graduate, start a company, start a business model, start writing AI, and figure out how to do some things before you go out into the workforce. And not only have to figure out your job, but how to use your job in AI. So I think that's the key, right? Something's got to give in this thing, and fresh, the kids out there that are trying to get, into their foot in the door. I think it's harder. You're going to have to either try to do it yourself with AI and then come into a company, or you're going to have to take a major pay cut and say, I'm willing to do this for almost nothing in order to get my foot in the door.
Yep.
And that's probably the path that you're on,
Yep.
if you're looking at it. Is that fair?
I agree. There's no more hand holding
Yeah.
that's going
Right.
on.
Right.
And there aren't as many programs, and there just aren't as many jobs. I think that the type of jobs will change, but I don't think they'll. My personal view is there won't ever be as many jobs within kind of the tech sector, at least within Silicon Valley, as previously.
Right.
So you have to learn. You have to take an entrepreneurial mindset to not only monetizing your skill set, but just learning and staying engaged. And if that's not your natural inclination, I can understand how that's difficult, but it's just a reality. And so it's either kind of recognize that and start improving your skills, start learning about these tools, et cetera, or it sounds trite, but like get left behind. I mean, it's I think it's kind of that simple at this point.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, universal income seems very likely. I was just in Japan and seeing, basically, we talked about the future, and there's not a ton of interpersonal skills happening. It's very much like, you ordering, it's just like jobs like McDonald's that won't exist because you're just going to push an iPad, you're going to switch the language, and you're going to pick what you want, and then somebody's just going to hand it to you. And like, you talk about
And maybe it's not even somebody, maybe it's a
yeah,
robot that hands it to you.
you're really looking at, uh, potentially, for younger, non-experienced people, some real struggles coming. So, you got to figure out how to sort of operate on your own. There's many opportunities. You just got to figure it out and dig in there.
Yeah. Do you think we have time for one more topic,
Yeah, let's
or
do it.
okay, just
I
quickly here,
love this last.
because I think this last one is very interesting relative to trends that have been happening in the space around this new administration and different posturing by tech companies. And basically we're in an era of, and I think TW has heard me say this before, but I think we're in an era of unbridled capitalism. And it's like, however you can, make money, find opportunity right now, like next 4 years, here's your window to do it. And these tech companies, again, going back to a prior point around shareholder value, are trying to create shareholder value and make as much revenue and make as much profits as possible. And so part of that and part of this new strategy is for these tech companies is getting more in bed with the government, with the military. These tech companies are becoming defense contractors now, just without the badge, which is a fascinating shift in terms of the idealism of what Silicon Valley kind of was or represented previously, kind of do no harm and not necessarily working with military systems, that whole kind of ethos. And now it's about, hey, can we get these contracts? And if you're willing to spend $10,000 on a VR headset per unit, like that works for us. So this is not like a side project or side quest for these tech companies now. They're really leaning into supporting, military DoD with their tools and services, to the extent that very recently CTOs of Meta and Palantir are actually joining like a special military unit. So I just find it extremely fascinating to see how quickly the shift has happened, how quickly kind of, the Valley has kind of changed their positioning around working with the military in particular. And this is nothing more than just my fascination around this change and how quickly it's happened.
Yeah, no, it's, and when we saw it really with Elon first, like Elon jumps in and is part of the administration, and you see some changes happening, and you wonder, what does it mean for your company? And now you're seeing it with these contract deals, OpenAI working with military, and it all makes sense, right? Like, everyone talks about the power of AI, for all these tech companies in every position. Of course, the government wants to use it as well. It makes total sense, especially in the military. It's just like, seeing the advancements, happening so quickly. It's just a matter of time before this thing is privatized and
Yeah.
capitalized at a scale with AI, just like natural. I saw 60 Minutes, they are running, you know, private military companies using AI in terms of like smart bombs and smart mines and all of these things. And it like totally makes sense. Like the government is using antiquated methods and old technology, and there's a bunch of bureaucracy. Now you've got a private company like SpaceX that's willing to spend a bunch of money and figure out how to go to space and reuse rockets. Same deal with these military things, right? You got mines and missiles that are way smarter than anything that's ever been developed, and now they're going to obviously market it to the government, and
Yeah.
it's kind of wild.
Yeah. And I imagine part of the play outside of just kind of capturing more revenue is this technology is so expensive right now. And if the government can pay that high like unit economic cost, like they're thinking, well, ultimately I imagine the thinking is, well, we'll be able to bring down consumer pricing over time based off of this revenue and create a supply chain that basically like drives down the cost for all their project lines. So I imagine that's part of it as well. But for me, the most compelling thing has kind of been the idealism shift that's happened here, and also kind of what this means for I think we try to orient a lot of our learnings for the everyday person and also founders as well based on our experience. And I think we're in this new era, and you think about products and software as productivity tools or social tools, but now it's military infrastructure, like these other plays that these companies haven't necessarily participated in before, but now the aperture is open for everything.
Right. Right.
And there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that. And it's also, where are the guardrails? Are there any guardrails left? Is it just like, hey, it's either us or China, and we're going to try to get there first, and all the other impacts kind of be damned? We'll see.
Yeah, it's like Elon has the falling out with Trump. That's been well documented. And then it seems like it's kind of paved the way for others to be like, wait a minute, maybe there's an opportunity here that isn't, political. That we're going to work, and it's a business decision, and we're going to try to stay, out of the political lines. But like, clearly, you're in it because you're in part. You have a government contract, and like, there's no dodging that. People are now okay with it, I guess, in terms of a business decision, because it's not like you're alienating half of your audience anymore. It feels a little more blended now than ever.
Yep.
So people are just like, all right, do what you got to do, and run it. So maybe it's for the best. I have no idea.
The blending is a larger TAM.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want to be in markets with the largest TAM. For those, TAM is total addressable market. You want to be in spaces with the largest total addressable market and capture as much share as possible. So now there's like there's an arms race going on.
As Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too. So they're in the game now, and it's interesting. I'm curious where all this pans out. I think it's for the better, honestly, because like the government and tech need to be a little more closely aligned, because like our government and our systems are just not good. So
yeah,
the more thinking and business rational decisions, even from a process standpoint that the tech industry has developed, the government can really use a lot of that. Like,
yeah,
for sure.
I don't disagree with that. What I would say is that the guardrail stuff is really important still, because we're moving so fast. We don't really have a full handle on what all this technology will enable us to do or actually do, or when AGI is coming. And AGI, I don't think will be a moment where it's like you just wake up and it's like, oh, AGI occurred. It will be kind of a more fluid process where it just kind of happens in stages. That is definitely a future where I want to make sure like there's some safety protocol, particularly when it comes to militarized capabilities, kind of biochemical capabilities, otherwise, so that we don't ruin this world.
Maybe it's something we could talk about next time, but I've thought about this a lot with all of the AI and digital things feeling, I wouldn't say unsure, but you feel like you're not sure what's real, what's not. It seems to me like real, live, face-to-face comms, communication, however you want to look at it, events, things are going to be even more important than ever.
100%.
Because you're going to want to know, like, FaceTime can be fake, Zoom can be fake, like us, we could be considered not real people. So like meeting people face to face and learning, talking, doing, I feel like is gonna be a thing. I don't know what that means for us, and like where to take that, but something we should talk about in the future. Like, what does that mean for all of us? Like, what are the things that we should be doing and thinking about? If in a couple years you can't distinguish what's real and what's not on your phone, you're probably going to put that phone down and step out into the world and know for sure what you're seeing and hearing is real.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. That's going
I
to
think
be
that's definitely something worth touching on either next week or one of our shows. So I'm excited about that. Yes, sir. Fun as always.